Snafu is a podcast that contains adult themes and language. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey guys, welcome back to Snap Food, where the situation's normal, all fucked up. I'm Shannon.
And I'm Corey.
And this is where we're going to bring you true stories of true crime, true mystery, and just truly fucked up shit that seems to happen every day, and then we forget about it.
And with today's episode, we're going to delve into that true mystery side of everything, where we're going to talk about those bizarre and mysterious circumstances of situations that happen, and we just kind of move on. There's all these stories that we think we know all the truth about, but as time moves on, as we learn more, different things start to make a lot more sense, but even more things are left unanswered, and those become even bigger mysteries the more we think we know.
Yeah, I think those are the kind of things that wrap us up in them, and we can't stop telling a new story about it, like Jack the Ripper, or Franz Ferdinand in the start of World War I, or like what we're going to talk about today, the Titanic. Mysterious, insane events that had gigantic, results, and no matter how long ago it happened, we're still trying to figure it out. We're still putting it together. And honestly, I like to put a lot of it down to fate.
And, we're not looking at a ghost ship here with the Titanic, so I'm kind of pulling no on the fate card. We're looking at a ship that has just all the wrong circumstances happen in just the right order to make probably, obviously one of the most famous shipwrecks and shipping accidents happen.
Dude, that's called fate.
It's just circumstance. We just are kind of rolling with what happens.
My point being is, it's just weird. It's just really weird that all these little really unfortunate events had to occur in order for this whole event to happen. And it's like saying, okay, if, someone turned out sick that day and the ship was 5 minutes later or whatever, all this wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a little bit, fateful for there to be so many things that had to go wrong for it to make it just this bad.
I mean, yeah, but then there's also just the circumstance that it's just what happened, and we have to live with the end result. So that's fate to me is something that's predestined, and I don't think any of these circumstances we're going to talk about, at least today, had to be predestined.
Yeah, I think you kind of told me when I first brought up the idea of this story, you were well, the Titanic was idiot-proof, but we didn't know what kind of idiot they have to prove it for.
Yeah, the Titanic is, obviously one of the most famous ships in the world. Everyone knows it. And yeah, she was called unsinkable, but we're making a situation that just no one could recover from this, and you're going to call something unsinkable, and something's going to test it. And all of these circumstances were the test to find out if the ship could actually sink.
So that's us bringing you the true mystery and hopefully trying to untie a little bit of it so it gets in your imagination and maybe you could tell us what you think seemed to happen.
So today, like I said, we're going to talk about the Titanic. And for those of you who think you know everything, because the Titanic has been one of those stories that we all grew up with, especially because...
I saw the movie. I know it all.
We saw the movie in 1985.
I know that Rose was a bitch and there was room on that damn door.
It was debris. Sorry, we just watched Rick and Morty. But, if you look back, 1985, Dr. Bob Ballard is out there with the Alvin, which is an underwater robotics tool. It's like a water submarine that they can use to take videos. He's the one who found the Titanic, and that's 85, so that's a year before I was born. So we all kind of grew up with this Titanic story, and the movie came out in the 90s, I want to say.
Yeah, 1997.
Yeah, so that was super, I was 11 years old and seeing my first set of boobies.
What? That was your first set?
I was 11. I don't remember any other boobies. Also, I was 11. Yeah, so let's get into it. Now, the Titanic was one of 3 Olympic-class liners that were produced and maintained by White Star Lines, which is...
What's that?
White Star Lines is the holding company, and they're the company that actually is in charge. It's like Carnival today. They own these boats, they started building these boats, and they were sailing them. Although nowadays, Carnival doesn't necessarily build all their ships, they'll put it out to contractors. White Star had a few companies that were assisting, they still kind of designed the vessels.
So like a liner is just basically like a
cruise ship.
Or a travel ship.
Yeah, sorry. I took a class in college called shipping and ports, so for me, liner just makes sense. But for those, yeah, a liner here just being an ocean liner, a cruise ship. At the time, the Titanic was one of the first ultra cruise liners, and she was lauded as the height of luxury, designed to rival and surpass the likes of the Lusitania and the Mauretania, which I'm not going to be able to pronounce. Both of these ships...
Oh, if you rewatch Titanic, you'll hear him talk about it. He'll say, it's not the Mauretania, darling.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm not going to rewatch the Titanic. It's not for free on any stream service right now. But these two ships, the Lusitania and the Mauretania, had both set ocean speed records across the Atlantic Ocean, and were the big ships of their day until the Olympic classes.
Did the Lusitania sink?
Yes, she did. But...
the
Mauretania? I don't think I don't know. I didn't look up onto them because they were old news.
The point is, this is the only way to travel.
Yeah, at this point, this is the only way to travel.
I mean, like, literally, like, you can't take a plane.
No, there's no plane travel. This is the only way to get across the ocean. And the companies are in a race to make the ultra luxury ships that can get people across the ocean quickly and, not under the deck in the lap of luxury.
So how fast would a ocean liner usually take?
They're gonna. If we're looking at steamliners, we're getting over there in a week, maybe 2 weeks. The Titanic was prepped to make the trip in 1 week, so she was going to be faster than the two ships previous that had set records across the Atlantic. Hell
yeah! If I'm just trying to get somewhere and you're gonna literally take a week off my travel,
yeah,
that's like taking 5 hours off my plane ride. I'm gonna take it.
The Titanic had 30,000 horsepower in her engines. The captain was...
It had what now?
30,000 horsepower in those engines. And the captain was not afraid to use that power to get their ship moving quickly.
Captain Dickhead.
Which, so, yeah. Just to recap that, we have the Titanic, which is going to be one of 3 ships in the Olympic class line. And she's built to rival the previous vessels that are out there and move people across the ocean. So, as I said, the Titanic was designed to be a very luxurious vessel. It's going to be out there to be the peak of the day. And the boat itself is owned by J.P. Morgan, who is an investment banker at the time, and everyone's going to know J.P. Morgan and Chase Bank. That's all the same company as it is today. And he's not going to ride on any boat that's going to be the same as someone else's. He's going to make the next big boat.
Well, if he has to be with the random public, at least it's going to be up to his quality. Because I don't think, unlike today, where the high class have multiple mega yachts, people didn't have those things. Only royalty had them. Yeah,
they're not going to spend that kind of money, and you're going to make investments. This is the time when investments are still being made. It's when the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers are starting to make their money.
But they're still having to ride public transport just to cross to
Right, because
Europe.
It's not old money yet. This is the time where it's still new money. So, they're not going to have their own yachts, so they're going to be making these. So it costs $7.5 million
Damn.
in that day and age, which I'm not even bothering to translate because even now, $7.5 million is a lot of money. And it took 3,000 people 2 years to build this ship. The beginning of the ship construction happened in 1909, and the keel was being laid about 3 months after the Olympic, which is the first of these 3 vessels.
Its sister ship.
Yeah, one of her sister ships. And the Olympic will be built a bit quicker than the Titanic because the Titanic was going to be built at a different standard. At least the interior of the Titanic was going to be designed to be even more lavish than the Olympic. And I think, obviously, like I said, people who are going to be on this boat are going to be the rich and famous, and this is going to be the most ornate vessel that crossed the ocean. If we're looking at it from that, tickets in that day and age were $4,700, which is something like $100,000 to $115,000 in this day and age.
That's crazy.
And
to me, that's just like, we want to talk about, back in the day, money was. But that's a lot of freaking money.
I mean, you look at it today. If we went out on there's the new boat that like Carnival put out. That's the biggest one on the water right now, and I think even riding on that is only like $500 or $500 to like maybe $2,000 depending on how you're riding.
Yeah, because cruise lines are death traps.
Yeah, they are. That's why I don't go on them, because that's how you catch rhinovirus. And so, just to give you an idea of how ornate this ship is, one, all the pieces of the ship were crafted by the tops of their fields, woodworkers, metalworkers, interior designers. Everyone that was working on this ship, they weren't picking some guy off the street. They were bringing in people who were the top of their field to do this.
You mean they weren't taking in the cheapest labor?
They were
spending some quality money.
They were spending quality money on this. They weren't going to the lowest bidder on these things.
Oh, so they weren't being like the army.
Yeah.
Good for them.
And, the ship had, a massive first-class saloon. There's 4 electric elevators. There's the grand staircase, which if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. That staircase...
The one that Jack comes down and he looks like, and then they look at each other and it's like, and then, yeah.
I guess I've seen this movie exactly twice when I was 11.
Boobies.
Yeah, that's all I saw
Got
it
it.
for.
But it's just a beautiful staircase.
And the staircase is massive. The ship has 10 decks on the inside of it, and the staircase goes from 7 of the 10 decks. It's a big grand staircase. And even on the ship, there's a swimming pool, and it's one of the first vessels. The Olympic, being completed a few months earlier, was the first vessel to set sail with a heated swimming pool. The Titanic is still in that same line, but this is the second ship out there that's going to have a heated swimming pool aboard.
But I mean, this is 1914.
Right.
It has a swimming pool.
Yeah, it's...
That could later on be possibly heated had it survived.
had it survived, yeah, that was going to be a heated pool. And like
a gym.
There's a full gymnasium. They had a Turkish bath.
Oh my gosh.
2 different cafes, and one that was strictly a Parisian cafe.
That's like my dream, is to go to all the kind of bathhouses in the world.
And, you could be on a Turkish bathhouse on a boat that costs you $100,000 to sail on.
I'm going to refrain from adding that to my dream because I don't think I'll ever afford it.
On this boat, they also brought in, for the cafes and the saloons, the amount of liquor and vice on board this boat. There's 20,000 bottles of beer. There's 1,500 bottles of wine and 8,000 cigars that were put on for this 1-week trip.
Isn't that just for the first class?
That's just for first class.
Damn.
So first class here, this is when they introduced the next level of first class. Second class aboard this vessel was comparable to first class aboard many others of the current time, many of its peer vessels. But first class aboard the Titanic was its own thing.
It was like unheard of.
They were loading cars on board to move it across because some people were immigrating to the U.S. or going to be spending some time in the U.S. There's a kennel on board that housed the 12 dogs that were brought
3
across
of which survived.
Yeah, I'm not getting into that yet. But yeah, 3 of the dogs survived. And they even had their own print newspaper aboard. And this ship is going out for a week.
What the fuck are you writing on board?
I can understand a flyer or something like that. Here's what happened on this cruise. But you're out there for literally a week. And there's less than 2,000 people aboard the ship, including the crew. A little bit more than 2,000 people aboard this ship, including the crew. You don't need a newspaper to keep you up to date in what's going on.
I don't know. You've got some of the most elite men in the world. Maybe they expect it.
I mean, they could be taking in print, but one of the weird things is with all this, extra that they had on board, they had a communications room about the size of a broom closet that only really accepted Morse code.
So they skimped.
They skimped on some things, but for the majority of it, a lot of the reports are all the technology. So the engines, the hull, all of that is going to be the top technology of the day. But yet they're still using Morse code to get their message across, where they could have been doing a little bit different. But it's also probably the easiest to get out when you're on the water like that. And on top of that, just for show, again, this ship had 4 smokestacks. Of those 4, only 3 of them are actually real smokestacks.
What the fuck is the point of that?
The third one they set up strictly for show, just so it looked like, if your own ship or the ship that you're trying to replace has 3 smokestacks and you're trying to make one that's bigger and better, you're going to add that 4th smokestack. It's like having a F-250 that you lift all the way up and put on some huge headers and make it the most obnoxious truck on the road.
And then you don't put the fake balls that hang from the end. Then what was the point?
I think the 4th smokestack is the fake balls that hang on the end of a truck.
I got you. Best way to describe that. Thank you.
That's exactly how that one has to be. So to look at the other classes, like I said, second is equivalent to first of some other boats, and even the third class, which is stowage class, isn't as bad as it could be on other ships.
It still sucks.
It still sucks, but they did have flush toilets, and they had to make sure that people knew how to use flush toilets.
They literally thought these people were so stupid they wouldn't understand flush toilets in the 1910s. And they're from Europe.
Yeah, they're from Europe. It's not like they're coming out of some other place.
That has a hole in the ground, like where I was in Asia, and they were like, well, don't lean back, because that's literally just a tart.
Yeah, and, another thing is they only had 2 bathtubs on board for the lower classes.
Fuck that.
And I'm not sure if this is like a bathtub you have in your bathroom or kind of like a bathhouse bathtub, but it's still only 2 for hundreds of people.
Woohoo!
For a
2
week.
bathtubs for hundreds of people during the time of cholera and tuberculosis.
Yeah,
and basically
I'm not gonna
everything that's like a germ that takes touch on touch. Yay!
I'm not going to be getting out onto that boat and taking those bathtubs.
That's definitely why they got searched for lice, though.
Oh yeah,
Before they were allowed to even board.
Yeah, before they're allowing people in stowage to board, they're checking for lice and they're checking for.
Sorry, I'm gonna pour because I'm not even at my story yet, but I'm into this. Go ahead. Don't let me stop you.
So they're checking for lice and they're checking for infectious diseases, so they're not bringing that aboard because, like I said, cruise ships are good for exactly one thing, and that's catching rhinovirus with everybody else on board.
Is that like rhinoplasty?
I don't know what that is.
Do you walk off looking fabulous?
I don't know what rhinoplasty is.
I don't know what rhino.
Rhinovirus is like catching like walking pneumonia on board a boat.
Rhinoplasty is when you get a new nose.
Oh, okay. Well, no, it's different. So they're trying to make it, safe to get on board, and with only 2 bathtubs, infectious diseases are going to spread very quickly.
Ugh, gross.
Or at the time of the sinking, the Titanic was been told that it didn't have enough seats for everybody aboard the vessel to get off safely on the lifeboats. But when the Titanic did launch, she was in compliance with the current laws of the time with the number of lifeboats she had on board. The whole sinking of the Titanic's going to change this law, but when she did launch, she was in compliance with the law. You're going to see reports, if you look into it, that she didn't have enough lifeboat seats for everybody.
But legally, she was doing exactly what was requested because, in assumption, you'd always be close enough to another boat, right?
Yeah,
like,
so you
wouldn't need that many lifeboats because boats would be coming back and forth with people.
So what happened is, if a boat for whatever reason if a vessel for whatever reason is needing to evacuate, is not an emergency, there's going to be someone nearby at all times that can show up to assist. And then you load people on a lifeboat, row them over to the new ship that's here to rescue you, and then row back, pick up the next load, and you just start a shuttle system back and forth.
Is there an assumption because unlike airways, like this is the only way to travel there, and not only the only way to travel, but the only way for other things to be shipped, that there would be just that many boats around, that there should always be a boat in...
Well, at that time, the Titanic, when she was sailing, she was keeping in contact, and again, I'm stepping on my toes for what I'm going to say in a few minutes, but there are a lot of times where they're in contact with each other, and someone's 50 to 100 miles away. It's like when you're up in the air, you're going to see a bunch of airplanes, or even if you're on the ground, you'll see airplanes going all over the place at all times. There's going to be a ship going one way or the other nearby, and that can show up and that can make it to you in probably about an hour. It's a well-traveled shipping path.
It's a big ocean. That's actually really shocking to
It's
me.
a big ocean, but it's a well-traveled shipping path to get goods and people from Europe into the Americas.
And it's the only way.
Yeah, it's the only way at this point. So now getting back to the ship herself, everyone's thinking that there are some points where they're putting less money into things. And there might be, there's all this discussion that I'm going to get into about the materials and the construction of the ship. Just so you guys know that the first class people didn't have to worry about any expense being spared. Most of their dinners and meals were 11 courses.
I mean, how could you expect anything less?
You're not going to expect anything less for paying $100,000 for a week aboard a ship.
Oh my god!
And
I would be so fat.
And the first class passengers they've also received a songbook that has 330 some odd songs that are memorized by all the ship's museums.
Ooh.
By all the ship's musicians, so that they can go out there and request a song, and on this list you can guarantee that they know that song. Let's look at who's aboard this ship. So the richest passenger is John Jacob Astor IV. He's worth about $2 billion when you count for inflation today.
If it makes the story even better or / worse, he was on his honeymoon. He's in company of the Countess of Roths. He's in company of Benjamin Guggenheim, who also famously went down with the vessel, who's an American businessman. You guys all know the Guggenheim as the name of museum. He's telling you that. You know it now.
You will definitely know it. And among other ticket holders for first class were the Vanderbilt family and the Hershey family. They're in league with like the Rockefellers, these big names in American old money. They all had tickets for this.
Old new money. Those bastards were raking it in.
Yeah, I mean, now they're still raking it in. And, some of these, though, but like the Vanderbilts and the Hershey family, they didn't attend the ship launch. They just didn't board, so they weren't on the ship.
That blows my mind. You paid like the equivalent of $100,000 for a ticket to then not go like, I'll take the next one.
That's being casually late to a party.
That's fate. It's fate.
Also, when we were looking through all the data, there's a part about the Titanic where she was supposed to set sail in March, and because of a situation that again we'll touch base on in a little bit with the Olympic, her sister ship, they pushed her back to launching on the 10th of April. There could be a reason why they didn't attend this one because the schedule didn't work.
Okay.
But you still spent $100,000 on a ticket and didn't get on that boat.
I mean, to them it was like what again? Like
It's $4,700.
But like in our time, I'm like, either way,
I'm just saying,
it's
like,
not money to just throw away.
You can understand like the person.
But I guess it was for them.
The gentleman who owns the Hershey company, he's spending $100,000. It's not a big deal in this day and age. That's why I don't mind using the inflation terms. We know Hershey's a massive company. When we look at the Titanic, though, you're gonna start seeing everyone's gonna start looking at the lore of the Titanic, and like Shannon was saying earlier, the mystery of the Titanic. And you could say that there's a lot of bad omens that are plaguing this ship. So just to list a few of these, this one was never christened because White Line just didn't believe in or White Star Line didn't believe in doing that. And some people will say that's a bad thing to go out on a ship that's not been christened.
Seamen are like very superstitious.
They're very superstitious. You can't have
in the first place.
You can't have bananas on boats in the Gulf of Mexico region and South Florida because ships will get lost on those banana boats will get lost. There's a lot of weird superstitions. So that's what's coming on here. 2 men died during her construction. And
I find that a small number, actually.
For out of the 3,000 in 2 years, I find that a tiny number. But
that's actually a small number. But when you want to point it out,
there's a number of injuries, but I didn't want to provide those numbers because you look at one report, it's going to say 5. You look at another report, it's going to say 77. You look at another report, it's going to say everyone got hurt at least twice. And then
a report from the company that's like no one ever got hurt. Everybody was happy every single day.
And then even when the Titanic is being launched, she displaces so much water. She's such a large vessel that most ports couldn't handle her. At one point, she pulled the SS New York from her mooring, snapping lines and pulling it out by suction alone.
Dude.
And almost colliding with this vessel hadn't it been for the tug captains and the boat pilots who had gotten in there and moved the New York out of the way. And at the same time, there's like a coal shortage or a strike going on. So where she's coming out of like Southampton, there's a number of these ships that have come in that are just in the way. So
because they can't go anywhere?
They can't dock, they can't take off, they don't have fuel. Oh. So they don't want to or they can't make a trade. So they're waiting and they're plugging up the channel, like the harbor path.
And then this big ass elephant of a boat just like dumps into the water and moves them all around.
Yeah, the Titanic's getting in the water, she's displacing ships and almost crashing into anything. That could also be part of the beginning of the end for Captain Edward Smith, who was the captain of the Titanic. Now, a little bit about him. He's 60-some-odd years old, been sailing for White Star Lines for 4 decades, and was very close to retirement. He's had his issues aboard the Olympic. He had a collision when he was captaining the Olympic, where he almost hit a British cruiser named the HMS Hawk. He actually did collide with that ship on the starboard side of the Olympic, tearing 2 large holes in the Olympic's hull above and below the waterline. And this flooded some of the watertight compartments and twisted a propeller shaft. This is the reason why the Titanic was actually pushed back 2 weeks to her launch on the 12th, is because they had the issue with the Olympic, so they wanted to handle that first and then deal with everything that was going to be on the Titanic, making it so the 2 vessels weren't sailing off side by side and they had time to basically patch up the Olympic's disaster.
What I find even crazier, though, is the ship that he hit, the Hawks, it's made to sink ships by running into them. This
Yeah.
is a warship, and this dumbass fucking hit it, and he didn't sink, and he almost sank it, and then he's like, ooh, just some repairs real quick. Let's go.
So with the way the Olympic hit, it flooded 2 compartments. And the Titanic, and I believe the Olympic as well, were all designed that they had watertight bulkheads, which would stop water from flowing into different compartments of the ship. And if 4 of the compartments aboard the ship were fully flooded, the Titanic could at least stay afloat still.
I'm just saying, it takes a lot to overlook that fuck up and then put him in charge of the Titanic.
Oh, it definitely is, but they're thinking, oh, this ship's made idiot-proof.
And not enough for
And
the
apparently
idiotness
not
of
enough.
Captain Smith, but Jesus.
And more superstitions for those nautical nerds like me. Most ships have a cat aboard or a family of cats aboard. They're going to take care of any kind of rodents and other pests.
Especially a 6-toed cat is lucky on board.
Yeah, that's why Ernest Hemingway, who has all his 6-toed cats because of his nautical adventures.
And you can visit them in Key West.
Yeah, which we've done a number of times.
And now we're going to bring them catnip.
And that's going to be so much fun. But the Titanic had a ship's cat named Jenny who was aboard, and she was reportedly seen taking her litter of kittens off the ship in Southampton, and it was never reported if she was on board or not. I'm gonna like to believe that she got off that ship with all her kittens and
Oh, if that makes you feel better, buddy.
lived happily in Southampton. There's gonna be rats in the ports, and she can get on another boat.
Okay, we'll leave it there.
So there's that, and like if a cat is gonna get off the boat, people are gonna see that. Seamen are gonna start to notice that, and they're not gonna really want to be on board.
None of them did that.
Yeah, but it's just the reports. And then just for a not so stellar situation, there was a book written about 10 to 15 years. I think it's actually 14 years before the Titanic was
Fate, dude.
was sailing, called Name Infutile, about a ship who was the biggest ship in the world at the time, named the Titan, that had also sunk in the Atlantic Ocean in the month of April.
And didn't have enough lifeboats.
And didn't have enough lifeboats.
Like, that's called fate.
Yeah.
Edgar Allan Poe wrote a very similar story about a different shipwreck and named the people it's just crazy. So again,
there's all this stuff that's going on with the Titanic, and
faithful.
It's just circumstances. But sometimes that jinx I can't shake off of naming it off after a boat from a story. So
Titanic.
Yeah, obviously Titanic comes out of Titan. And there's a lot of different other circumstances people were seeing, and some of them they're getting argued about, others not so much. But the Titanic did sink, and we know that. She was called the unsinkable vessel. She is the most famous instance I can think of a ship that has sunk.
Maybe because they played that up so much.
I think they did, yeah, and maybe that's probably not the best thing. Like, you don't want to name any boat or ship you own like Calm Seas or anything like that, or Blue Sky, because it's just going to jinx it. So you're going to make your whole marketing campaign about calling it unsinkable. Good on you, but...
I actually came up with my imaginary boat name the other day.
Did you?
Because I have to see a lot of stupid boat names in the places that I work all the time, and it's hard for me to remember them. But I was thinking about the Yakuza, and I thought I could have a boat named the Yacht Cruiser. Cruiser?
Oh, God.
Get it? The Yacht
Nope,
Cruiser?
I'm not getting on that one. That's how you die.
Whatever. I thought it was fucking funny.
So,
The Yacht Cruiser.
I'm gonna give some numbers in the next few minutes. You can take them or leave them, but they're gonna be approximations. So I'm not gonna get you like 716 people, but I'm gonna give a few numbers. The ship did sink, and this is on April 15th.
What?
But she only had less than half of her total allotted passengers. The Titanic could take something like 35,000 people, or 3,500 people, and she only had 1,300-ish aboard.
Really?
Yep. She had less than half the amount of people.
With the crew?
No, it's just passengers.
Oh, okay.
But with the crew, there was about 915 or so crewmen. It's been reported that only 5% of them are able-bodied seamen. So people that actually know how to handle a vessel, how to work on these vessels. Most of them are going to be
engineers, people down below.
Stewards.
No, yeah, most of the people who are considered crew aren't working that boat. They're literally made to serve and help the wealthy.
And especially on this one where you're
manage.
having meals that are 11 courses, you're going to need a few servers. But, it's interesting for me that only 5% of them were able-bodied seamen. At the time the Titanic was out there, The reports are there's about 2,200 people all said and done, so passengers and crew aboard the vessel.
Okay.
When she went out.
Sense.
But less than half of the total number of passengers that she could hold, and then less than the total number of passengers with crew included were aboard. She could have had 3,500 passengers, but she only had, including crew, only 2,200 people. So Captain Smith, he gets to sail the nicest boat that's going to be out there that has 30,000 horsepower, and he's not going to be shy about using this.
And this is like his retirement thing, right?
Yeah, it's one of his last cruises that he should be on. And it's been reported that this ship, while going through the northern Atlantic, was sailing at just half a knot slower than her maximum speed. During this year and the time frame that we're out there in 1912, the coast of Greenland, it was a little bit more mild of a winter, which is causing a lot of icebergs to break off of the mainland. So off of Greenland and the northern ice sheets, because it's so mild, the weather's letting it melt and icebergs are drifting off. Ice sheets, which are going to be just massive chunks of ice, are drifting into the path of where the ship is. There's somewhere between 6 and 20 different messages sent to the Titanic warning of ice fields and ice sheets and icebergs being spotted in the area.
That the captain should have been completely aware of, right?
Yeah, the captain should have been. When the ship is underway, the radio officers, which there were 2 people working the radio, they should have always been at the radio, would report to the captain, the first or second mate, and let the person who's actively in charge of that ship know that we have reports of ice fields and ice sheets and icebergs. And then when you change your officer of the watch, so who's on the bridge at the time, you give them all that information. You have a boat log, a ship's log, and everyone should know what's going on. So the weather being reported is very clear, and we have all this room for disaster, though. And that's what's really interesting about the shipwreck.
It seems like what you just said is he got all these notes, and then he didn't listen to a single fucking one.
He didn't listen to a single one. He moved the ship's path about 21 miles off course.
Fate.
So they had moved. They kept going at supreme speed. The SS Californian was out there, and she had actually brought herself to a full stop because of the ice.
Yeah, I mean, just because you're big, almost every other boat out there is slow.
Yeah, everyone else out there is stopping, and the SS Californian, who shows up after the Titanic sinks, has stopped herself, sent a message over, and the Titanic was running Cape Race, which is, they're running kind of like almost repeating stations for Nova Scotia at this point, helping send messages around, and they had told other warnings like, hey, we're busy, we don't have time for that.
Wow, so they were just being total dicks.
Yeah.
And then karma.
And the officer on the watch had told people in the crow's nest to keep their eyes out for icebergs. But eventually...
What's it matter if you're just blowing through?
Right, and there's nothing you can do at that point, and that's where there's some more issues that come up, and I'll get to that in a second.
I just want to point out, the captain never really seems to be on deck that often.
No, he's off doing his own thing.
Eating with the first class, he's showing up, in random parts, talking to people.
He's carousing with the passengers.
Yeah, he's basically on retirement and then checking in up above. that's how I feel about it.
And that's pretty much what was going on. So eventually, the inevitable does happen, and 37 seconds after spotting an iceberg, the Titanic hits the iceberg. Now, there's a number of different stories that people will hear about how the Titanic should have or shouldn't have hit the iceberg in order to survive. But what we do know is that the Titanic did spot the iceberg, and it was called for a hard to starboard turn, which is the ship's going to put all its weight on the starboard, which is the right side of the vessel, and turn to her left, or port. And that was designed to make the ship go around the iceberg, and she would have turned around it. And there's different reports. Again, I can't vouch for all of the truth behind this, but I've been seeing reports that if she had continued on at full speed, she would have cleared the iceberg and gotten around it. But...
You mean straight ahead?
No. So if she did this, if she kept at full speed, pulled hard to starboard, which pushed all the weight to the starboard side so the ship could turn to the left, so it wouldn't, tip. You're putting all your weight on the right side of the ship, and you're turning a massive ship to the left a little bit, you're gonna list, you're gonna lean.
Yeah.
So you're balancing out that lean. When they're doing that, instead of keeping at full speed, they start to slow the ship down. Mm-hmm. And doing that was what kind of had an issue on it, according to some reports.
They slowed down. What you're saying is if they had gone full speed ahead, they were already fucking doing.
If they had stayed at the same speed but did this maneuver to the turn,
they might have cleared it.
There's reports that it could have cleared it.
Oh, that's just guesswork.
I mean, there's all this is going to be guesswork. All we do know is that the ship went down. But
wasn't the boat Ori having to compensate for a lien?
So yes, before she even launched, there was a fire below deck, and in order to help compensate for weight distribution on board, they moved a lot of things over to the starboard side already, which gave her a 3-degree tilt to her right side, which was what helped the ship from preventing almost a rollover. The way the ship hit the iceberg, because she's trying to go around it, there's the iceberg, it's not just a block. There's going to be rivets and juts of ice out. That is what actually hit the ship. But if they had continued at full, if they didn't move this over and they were sailing at a 0-degree tilt, it's been reported that the ship would have turned over on her left side. She would have actually, instead of crashing, how we'll discuss in a minute, she would have rolled to her side. Yeah, the ship would have sunk and gone down on her left side instead of how she did.
Damn.
So, they continued the vessel on and they slowed her down. That's when she struck the iceberg. Now, there's the 2 reports that if she continued on doing that same maneuver at full speed, she would have cleared the iceberg. Or if she had taken the time to hit the iceberg head on instead of trying to turn, the damage would have been controlled and you wouldn't have a 300-foot long, 10-foot high gaping hole in the side of your vessel.
300 feet long.
Yeah, 300 feet long on the side of the vessel that's 10 feet high. It's the giant size of the hole that just caused water to be flooding in.
Is that why you think maybe he wanted to go full speed ahead? He thought if he hit anything head on, they would just clear it and just keep going. That's why he went to bed.
I don't know.
I really get mad about this captain.
I don't know how the captain's thinking. I wasn't there, and there's not many reports from a dead man about what he was thinking about during the time the Titanic was on. But, there's reports that if you kept at that speed, you could clear things. There's reports that if you kept at that speed and hit it head on, you would have only, it had been like crumple zones in a car, and you would have lost a few decks. But the ship has watertight bulkheads, supposedly, that would have stopped water from moving. And like I said, if 4 compartments of this vessel had flooded, then she could have stayed afloat.
Only 4.
No more than, at least, it can at least float with 4 flooded.
Because they could shut it down.
They can shut it down and prevent water from getting into other parts of the ship.
Yeah, but that's way more than, 300 feet is way more than 4
There's I think there's 12 different compartments that got filled with water. And then there's other reports that because of this, no compartment could really be watertight anymore. So even shutting the bulkheads wasn't going to do anything to slow the water and keep the ship afloat. But it's been reported that if she had the four bulkheads flooded, she wouldn't have sank as fast as she did, and rescue could have arrived in time.
Huh. Once they hit, they go to a full stop.
Once they hit, they ended up going to a full stop, which at that point, I don't think I wouldn't want to be moving the vessel and getting anywhere out, because as soon as you hit, you send out a report of SOS, save our ship, save our souls. And that's when other ships are starting to head towards you.
Oh, that's dark as hell.
And you have, so it's 37 seconds after sighting the iceberg, they hit. And then it's 2 hours and 40 minutes after impact that the ship is sunk. One thing I love about this, and it's kind of a macabre detail, but if you remember the Titanic, there's the band that's playing. They're playing out until the last call of the ship. They're on the deck playing, trying to keep morale up. That's actually a true story, and it's been reported that for 2 hours and 5 minutes.
No, you can literally keep track of time on the Titanic by how the band plays and what they're playing.
Yeah, but they were playing, we know that the ship is going to sink, and it's reported that it had 2 hours and 40 minutes before she actually went completely under. The band was playing for 2 hours and 5 minutes of that. So these guys were still playing, and just the way the disaster was handled, I'm just going to say it's bizarre. It's not necessarily bad or good, because I would rather have a band playing to try to relax people if I was one of the people in charge of the evacuation.
Well, there's even a priest, giving last rites.
When we know that the vessel hits, we have people panicking, and we have calls for getting to the lifeboats. They're calling for women and children first.
But nobody's actually freaking out because nobody's yelling, get to the lifeboats. It's just, they're literally saying, yes, we have to go to the lifeboats, but it's a precautionary measure.
Okay.
They're keeping it, they got a band up there playing, they're keeping it as calm as possible. And this is a huge mistake.
Yeah, meanwhile, while this is going on, you have all the water flooding into the ship. Wasn't watertight inside, the bulkheads weren't being watertight. The bilge pumps were not able to pump out the water as fast as it was flooding in.
300 feet open gap.
And we're looking at 100,000 liters of water in no time entering the ship. So the Titanic struck the iceberg very, very late on the 14th and sunk in the very early morning of the 15th. That's why it happened like really close to midnight when it struck the iceberg. But the day that the ship had struck the iceberg, there was supposed to be a lifeboat drill that got canceled for whatever reason.
I think he's just being lazy.
He probably is.
It doesn't look good on him. If they purported in the media multiple times the unsinkable ship, they're going to have people going, well, why do I have to do this stupid shit again?
Yeah.
And he was like, fine, don't do it. You have other duties to do. Come on.
Yeah.
And I blame Smith for everything. That's just easy. Just blame a man.
All right. I'll let you do that. I'm not saying you're right or wrong because he definitely didn't.
Definitely.
Definitely didn't handle this properly.
My mama said. My mama said.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
That gator's an ornery because
they got all them teeth and no toothbrush.
I'm not going to edit that out.
So let's revisit the spot I was just going on about with the timeline. 37 seconds after sighting the iceberg, the ship hit.
Bam! There's no time to do shit.
No, you hit an iceberg. You're going to feel it throughout the ship because you're tearing that 300-foot...
I'm actually proud of people who don't have walkie-talkies reporting to each other that there's a damn iceberg ahead in 37 seconds and doing something about it. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And the hit of the iceberg is going to be felt throughout the ship. And in the next 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 40 minutes, is how long it took the Titanic to sink, split in half, and then sink again, all the way to the bottom of the ocean. And, most people thought the ship had sunk just in one piece, but the way it happened, the front of the ship, had started sinking first. And the way the weight distribution was, the ship actually snapped in two, and the smokestack started falling. I know it's been reported that a bunch of bodies were hit with the forward smokestack, but then the ship did split in two, and the second half of the vessel went, so she went straight down, not at an angle. That second half of the ship went straight down in the ocean, just like you'd see in the Titanic movie. Just to give you guys a visual on how it works, that was probably very, very accurate. The first ship who actually arrived is the Carpathia, and she was actually going... I believe she was going eastbound. She was going towards like Sweden, and actually had ended up collecting people, turning around and going back to New York to drop people off because it's the closest port. After the Carpathia arrived, she was collecting most of the lifeboats, loading people in by either lifting the lifeboats up, lowering down ropes for people to climb, throwing people in slings, even throwing children in mailbags, like to carry letters and stuff, are being lifted out of the lifeboats onto the Carpathia. And once all the lifeboats are collected, they do, an initial search of the bodies. So after the California and the Mount Temple showed up, they were here and kind of just collecting the dead. They did pull a number of people, I think the number 6, out of the water, and that's with the Carpathia. So some people were in the water and they were fine, but you're looking at 20-degree temperatures.
They weren't fine at all.
No. It's going to take you about like 15 minutes and you start hitting hypothermia and dying. So the Carpathia eventually starts resetting her own course. But having collected, somewhere between 700 and 730 people from lifeboats and from the water, this is out of the 2,230 people that the Titanic had on board. Only 700 survived. That's less than a third of the people survived this shipwreck, and that's a huge number. And of those survivors, only 61% of the first class survived. Less than half, I think it's reported at 49%, from second class survived, and less than 24% of the third class passengers survived this disaster. And that's all the craziness that happened with this.
All right, and then with that being said, I'm going to do my portion of the story, and we're going to talk about the luckiest girl in the world, Violet Jessop, who was a stewardess on the Titanic and also survived another sinking of a different boat at another time. Her parents were William Jessop and Catherine Kelly, who were both Irish immigrants from Dublin, who came to Argentina in the mid-1880s. Her father decided to come to Argentina to try his hands at being a sheep farmer. And so her dad, William, came first. Her mom, Catherine Kelly, followed. And within a year of them both being in Argentina, so also came Violet. She's going to be the first of 9 babies. They didn't have a lot. According to Violet, her mom really put love before everything else, and when she moved to Argentina, she was just as happy as could be with her one-room adobe house that her husband had built for her. So, things are simple, things are hard, but they're happy.
Yeah.
The unfortunate thing about being like a shepherd in Argentina is that they would hit a lot of very dry periods of time. There's not a lot of water. There wasn't rainfall. So it wouldn't take a lot for all that dry grass to set on fire. So it would take something as little as the light hitting off a flintstone the wrong way or a really careless match being dropped, and they would have blazing fires that were uncontrollable. And with no water up there, the only way in 1880s to get these things to be stopped off at the head is that they would have to sacrifice a number of mares by cutting up their belly. Of course, they would be dead, and then they would drag the horse back and forth across the field in order to soak the grass enough so that it would not catch fire when the fire reached that.
I guess that's one way to do it.
So eventually, Violet's father comes to terms with the idea that if he can't get himself a full flock of sheep, he's never really going to make it as a sheep herder here. And that's almost impossible to do for him right now. So he actually decides to take a job with the Port Authority, and his family left their little home that he built and they moved to Bahia Blanca into a large brick house. They were very excited about this because imagine going from a one-room little tiny home to a big house. But that didn't even last for very long because before they knew it, he had another job a little bit further down the Southern Railway in an even bigger house. So this third job of her father's for the railway line had them kind of in a less populated area, but since he was a man of high esteem to the locals, they started calling him Don Guillermo, would love to come out and ask him for advice or for help. And so Violet remembers that there was a certain situation where a woman known as Donna Rosa came to Violet's father speaking of a really sick female traveler and her son. The family quickly proceeded, like all of them came down to Donna Rosa's house to see what the matter was with this woman. And their young son, Ray, went so far as to peer into Donna Rosa's house for the first time. And it was like all the times he'd come down to this woman's house, the little boy was too scared of her and would stay back at the gate. Mm-hmm. But this one time, like, there's this really sick woman. He does decide to, like, lean into the doorway. He wants to peer at her, see what she looks like. And when the mom came up and saw him looking in, she kind of shooed him off. But Violet remembers that it was really strange that they actually asked Violet's mother to go into town and get the doctor. Yeah. You have to understand, in this town at this time, Violet's mother is considered more of a upper class lady now. And so to ask her to do such a chore, whereas a man probably or somebody else should have gone in.
Wait, I thought she was living in a one-room
Not anymore.
House.
She's living there. He's a station master, like, position. They got a big house now.
Okay.
You know, she gets dressed at 4:00 every day for, you know, if they were to have visitors. This is Victorian era people. They have, like, their ideas of how things are going to go regardless of money. And Violet just remembers it being really strange for them to have even asked her mother to go in town to get the doctor. Let alone her mom did, no question. Yeah. Like, something was wrong enough that her mother got a carriage or a horse and went into town and got the doctor. So once she returned, she brought the doctor, shooed her children away from the house, and the doctor looked out for the woman, but by the next day, she had passed away from a disease they called black scarlatina, which is scarlet fever. So scarlet fever is a highly contagious disease spread by coughing and sneezing, and also by touching any item that has had this germ spread to it, and then touching your own mouth. So just like consumption and just got about every other damn disease we talk about in the early, 1900s, late 1800s that we've eradicated at this point, it's all like very physical. Like it's so easy to catch. And so the woman dies, and Violet recalls that her parents become very, very busy for like the next several days, and it kind of leaves her and her brother to kind of play and do whatever they want without supervision. And so the next day, the two siblings are running around outside, and they come across a burning pit, and it's filled with a pile of really nice, not very burnt clothing. Uh-oh. Yeah. As children do, when you find something neat, what do?
You're gonna grab it.
You're gonna grab it. You're gonna play with it. They played dress up.
Of course they did.
And being really proud of the really nice clothing that they just found, they went to go show it off. The moment their mother, like, put eyes on them, she starts freaking out. And you know that feeling little kids get when, like, they're so proud they're going to show their mom this thing, and then the first moment they go to do it, their mom is already mad, and now they don't want to, they're like, I don't even want to tell you what had just happened. Like, they already know it's bad. So she demands to know where they get the clothes. They explain, look, we found it out in a hole outside. She loses her mind. She makes them take those clothes off. You know, of course, she knows exactly what's happened. Scarlet fever is running through the town.
Yeah.
You know, people are doing a shitty job at getting rid of things that are contagious, and her children just found a pile of this and just basically rolled into it and put it on. I mean, it must have been so scary. And the fact is, Ray died 3 days later. They both got scarlet fever. Violet doesn't even remember his passing. She just remembers eventually waking up from a deep stupor and having discovered that her head had been shaved.
Oh.
Around this time, Violet would develop a cough that often actually kept her up late at night while everybody else was sleeping. So she couldn't sleep often, so she would just wander around the house. She didn't really mind it. She kind of enjoyed like the quiet of the house, especially considering the fact that every single year her mom popped out a new baby boy.
Yeah.
Most of her childhood, after I think this bout of scarlet fever, most of her childhood is spent in bed from like one illness or another, and she actually recalls the most unpleasant of these illnesses being caused from something that she actually did. So she had been in the house and she found little saucers of poison that her dad had placed on high shelves in order to get rid of flies in the summer from the house, and she didn't know what it was. She didn't know it was poison, so she like literally sampled it like it was syrup from each saucer and just got incredibly sick.
Yeah, that'll do it.
So her dad gets a new position, and once again the family moves, and this time they go to Buenos Aires, and Violet loves it. It's, you know, it's the city of her dreams. They don't have, you know, like paved roads or anything, but this is a major city compared to all the other places she's been to.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I can only imagine it's a tropical, beautiful like haven. I honestly think it must have been gorgeous. While she's growing up there, Violet caught typhoid fever. This is like, I'm reading the book. And by the way, I got most of my notes from Violet Jessop's own biography called The Titanic Survivor. And she was, you know, helped to write it by John Maxton Graham. But it's like every other page, every other paragraph, it's like, oh shit. Oh damn. Oh no. Like, I can't help it. The woman had a good story to tell. So, she catches typhoid fever. She's bedridden. She's consumed by a fever and having congestion of like the lungs.
Yeah.
And all she could recall was darkness. And then she's placed in a really hot bath, and then they wrapped her in cold sheets, and then nothing. And then by the time she finally regained consciousness, all she remembers seeing is like her parents in a desperate vigil over her. I mean, they really thought this was it. Like, she's gonna die. And so, although, you know, once Violet gets over this, although she's the age to go to school, her parents actually decide, on the advice of a doctor, obviously not to send her to school. Yeah. I mean, she's been very sick multiple times, and they're sure that if she goes to school, she's just not going to get any better. So instead of sending her to public school, her parents do choose to continue her education by having her tutored by a local English lady at her house, which Violet is overjoyed by. She's getting a very apt like education from this woman. The unfortunate part is she's often like so sick and like has to see doctors so randomly that she does miss a lot of her teaching. And that made her pretty sad.
Of course.
3 months later, Violet suffered her first hemorrhage due to her lung ailment.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and her parents couldn't keep her home at this point. They had to take her to the British hospital in Buenos Aires, and so it's a large hospital, and the idea for a child to have to stay away from your family in a big building full of a bunch of strangers and sick people. It's fucking terrifying.
Not anything I'd want to do.
No. And so I think it's so cute because they kind of knew how nervous she was, and when she had found out that she had to stay there, her mother kind of mentions to the doctor, like, oh, Violet loves all those flowers outside you have in the garden. They're all blooming. And the doctor does something I have never heard of anybody doing. He literally goes, well, then I will put her bed out there.
Oh.
And
All right.
And he does.
That's unexpected.
Yeah, and he has a little sick girl and she doesn't want to be there and she loves flowers. So he literally puts her bed out in the garden for her to enjoy the flowers every day.
That's a good doctor.
I think that's amazing. That's not something you find nowadays.
No, not at all.
So yeah, she has to stay in the hospital for these long hemorrhages, and she does bleed incredibly heavily. Like, it's just, when a hemorrhage happens, there's just blood everywhere. By the time that she's staying in the hospital, the hemorrhages just continued to increase in frequency, and at times it would get so bad that they would send a runner off to her family's house to go get her mother, because they were literally afraid, like, this was it. At some point, the hemorrhages start to slow down and the attacks seem to have ceased, so Violet is allowed to convalesce at a nearby estate that belongs to some of her parents' friends. They're out traveling. But it doesn't take even a month for her to be back into the British hospital. She can recall laying in a bed, and she's overhearing a doctor say, "What a shame, remarkable child. I shall miss her when she's gone." Which
that's not what you want to hear.
No, that's fucked up. Oh, poor sweet thing.
That's
too bad she's gonna die.
Definitely not what you want to hear when you're laying in a doctor's office.
But you know
hospital.
what? She's seen enough doctors and she's been sick long enough that this girl's stubborn, and like her only thought was like, me die, good luck.
Yeah.
You know. I mean, but at the time that he says this, Violet, she's laying in bed. She's unable to move. She's just laying still all day, sucking on ice. She's their treatment was having her swallowing something called creosote.
Okay.
And she could only communicate by like a writing pad. She couldn't talk whatsoever.
That's not good.
And so her father spent about as much time as possible with her, outside of work. And eventually he explained to her that the doctors thought she wasn't going to live and that she had a certain amount of time to live, and that they did think that maybe if they moved up into the mountains that she could extend her lifetime like a little bit longer. This blows me away. Violet tells her dad, no, that's too expensive. We can't move the whole family. And her dad's like, too late. I already put in. We already got it. We're going.
Yeah.
And he literally tells her, where there's a will, there's a way. A very positive family.
Absolutely.
I mean, he literally realized that if he wanted his child to live just a little bit longer, he'd have to uproot his whole family, and he was willing to do so.
Yeah.
When she does finally get out, she gets to go back to her house that she's barely had any time in. And at that time, the city had actually flooded from like major water storms. Mm-hmm. And the water was so high in the streets and in the houses. She remembers getting back to her house and all of their like family's belongings being stacked up, or else it was going to be drifting around the floor in water. The streets were so flooded, people were using like rickety boats that they like put together to travel.
Must have been a hurricane or something.
No, it's just, you get these major tropical storms that come through. There's no irrigation system yet.
That's true.
And the city's just flood. So that autumn, she gets back to her house, and then her last recollection of that house was being in a boat. Her last recollection of the house is her leaving with her family, all their belongings, like all stacked up in a boat, and them turning a corner down the street and it just being ruined because she had another hemorrhage on the way out, and like there's just streaks of blood in the water. And she said it just ruined the picture of her family home for like the rest of her life. Mm. So she's all bloody. They take this boat down the road and get over to the railway station. And when they arrived at the train station, the poor guard is freaking out because he's never seen a little girl covered in so much blood. Yeah. But he knew her father, William. Everything got settled really quickly, and they got them all on board without a fuss. They had to move up into the Andes Mountains. They moved there, and she does actually start to feel a lot better.
Good.
And it's at this time that the newest baby, Dennis, is not doing very well. They are blaming the flooding and the moving for, putting too much pressure on such a small animal baby.
Yeah, 6 of 1.
So at this time, like, Violet's feeling a lot better. She's been wandering around like the yards, enjoying herself. The family had just gone through the nerve-wracking effects of the Sonda wind, which is a scorching windstorm that just goes straight through the Sonda Pass in the Andes Mountains, and it's just a really scary thing, you know, for a child to live through. And so Violet eventually convinces her mother one evening that they should go take a carriage ride. The baby has stopped fretting, the children are all napping, like, let's leave father to take care of everything and let's just relax for one day. Let's go on a carriage ride.
Yeah.
And they do, and they have a great time. When they return to the house, they find that their father has set up tea and like little snack cakes for them to eat in her bedroom. So the mother and her take like little tea. And then, of course, there's like this dramatic rocking of the house.
Of course.
There's an earthquake, right? Like,
I'm just not going to keep that kid around anywhere.
Anywhere Violet is, I would like to be on the opposite side of the world.
Yeah.
So, they're taking tea and an earthquake hits and she remembers hearing a scream outside and then everything just was quiet. I mean, it was just like that, like quake and done. And so all of the children had actually even slept through it. Still, Violet and her mother ran into the room to check on the children and Violet went over to the baby. And she realized that the sick little baby didn't look sick anymore. His face had completely, like, lapsed into a smile. He looked very relaxed. And he was dead. He had died.
Oh.
Yeah. So, her story, her life story is just like, oh.
Yeah,
that
it's
sucks.
just, I feel like all I'm saying is, I just don't even know what to say to some of this stuff.
I promise we'll get to the Titanic part soon. All right. So, Violet does eventually far surpass what the doctors projected for her date of death. She's very stubborn. She's decided she's going to live.
Yeah.
And she does manage to convince her parents to let her go to school like the other children. And her hopes for a baby sister becomes real. Every year her mom has popped out a boy. And by now, 2 of them have passed away, Ray and Dennis. They have a little girl. She's so excited. It's like literally her prayers answered. But by summer, that baby has passed away. She caught meningitis and died. And this is a real thing that didn't happen that long ago.
Yeah.
Like, why did these people have so many kids? Well, the fact is you didn't know how many were going to make it.
Yeah.
That's a very real fact. And so the baby got meningitis and passed away, but luckily enough for Violet, within another year, her mom gave birth again, and this time again it was a girl.
Yay.
This one lives.
Good.
Yeah. But in the March of 1903, William Jessop dies.
How?
I don't know. So that's the one thing about Violet is she has this weird sense of protection for her family and friends. So she'll tell you an event, but she might not go into like great detail in order to like protect those people. All I know is in March of 1903, she's sick in bed with a small fever. And her dad comes to her 2 days before his birthday, and he tells her that he's got to go to the hospital, he needs to get checked out, and he might have a surgery.
Yeah.
But in 2 days, she can come visit him for his birthday, and they will celebrate together. And then he just never came home again. The mother went off to go visit, and she took forever, and they all kind of realized that something was really wrong when it took her too long to come home.
Yeah.
By the time mother comes walking through the door, she's arm in arm with William's boss and the boss's wife, and they just knew, like, you didn't have to say a thing, like, father was dead. This literally left 4 little boys, 2 girls, and she's pregnant.
Of course she is.
So everyone kind of convinces Violet's mother that the best idea for her and her children having no family here is that she needs to go to England where she's got some relatives. So that's what they do. In April, the families packed up all their belongings and they leave for England. And the next month, Violet would turn 16. I mean, all this happens just...
And his first 16 years are action-packed, I guess.
Poor Violet. It doesn't stop, though, because it's just going to keep going. So when they get over to England... Violet had to spend like a couple of different days with her mother trying to find rooms for them to rent.
Yeah.
But they found out really quickly in this dark, nasty city. I mean, the first thing Violet saw was a cloud of smoke. Not London.
Yeah.
She saw a cloud of smoke that London caused. I mean, that was such a dirty, filthy place back in the 1800s, 1890s.
Yeah.
Just from the factories. Here's a woman with like all these lung issues that had moved to the mountains as a child just to survive, and now she's following her mom into England. It's Probably not the best of ideas.
Oh, yeah, definitely not.
And they quickly find out that there's no way they're going to be able to rent rooms if these people find out just how many kids this woman has.
Yeah.
So in order to even rent rooms, like, she does have to admit, like, yes, I have 4 boys, but I promise I will send them off to school very soon.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of how things were done. So since there was very little money left to live on after her father died, they managed to get a room. And she had to send the boys away to school. So her best option ended up being to send the boys to a Catholic orphanage. And this freaked me out really, like, at first. Because, like, why? Why, if you're going to go all this way, why send them to a Catholic orphanage?
Yeah.
But evidently it seems more like a thing that poor people could have done, where you drop off your child and they live there and they're fed there and they're taught there.
It's kind of like just a shelter.
Yeah, and when you have enough money, you can get them back out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, all 4 boys go off to a Catholic orphanage. Violet's mother had to get employment. So the baby's born, but it dies at birth. Is that lucky or unlucky? I don't know. Violet's mom gets a job as a stewardess in the Royal Mail Line shipping company. So that's just a stewardess aboard these big ships, just like we were talking about. And again, her duties would be to take care of passengers on board. And so she did this for 5 years, from 1903, the year that William dies, all the way to 1908. Of course, her first Christmas in England, Violet had to spend it in the hospital. Because imagine what England's doing to her.
Oh, yeah, it just seems typical for her.
And so she's recovering from gallstone surgery. We should have, like, a drinking game this whole time. What is Violet sick from this time?
I think I'd already be wasted.
So she's in the English hospital right now for gallstone surgery. And she's totally flabbergasted at this hospital because the treatment, the behavior, it's completely different from the nice, flowy ways of Buenos Aires hospital. So her first hour there as a patient, she's dumped into a tepid bath, which I'm sure has been used by other people.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
The nurse decides to scrub her hair with carbolic soap and basically leaves a bunch of soap in her hair, which is just, like, really harsh, nasty, awful shit to be on you in the first place. And then she gets put in bed, and the whole time the nurse does this with her, she doesn't say a word.
Oh.
Not hi dear, not like,
better.
I'm sorry you're feeling bad, nothing. Just like, I'm just gonna have to scrub you and put you in bed. Don't do a job if you're fucking miserable.
Yeah.
So, she's also shocked to see, like, how they treat, like, the doctors here. They're basically treated like demigods. You know, when a doctor walks into the room, everybody goes silent. Like, you're not expected to make a noise unless spoken to.
It's a different world over there.
Yeah, so the doctors even came up to her and asked her for her history when she explained that she had all these, you know, medical history with a bunch of lung issues.
Yeah.
The doctor literally starts banging on her back and tells her impossible. There's no trace of that. Like, basically just tells her she's a liar.
All right, well, whatever you know, doctor.
Yeah, whatever. And this is all when she's, you know, just 16. So when Violet does eventually leave the hospital, she stays in the one room with her mother and her sister. And then it's just her and her sister when her mother's away working aboard a ship. The two eventually, like, they really want to go to school and they want to save some money. So they eventually convince their mother to allow them to go to a convent. Mm-hmm. And so together they would go live there and study there. They wouldn't really be separated and it would be really nice.
Yeah.
I think that was pretty much the most perfect option because, you know, Violet's 16, you know, away from family, and it's going to help her grow up in those pivotal years without sexualizing her or, you know, turning her into, like, not having hopes for the future. Like, they're literally just trying to teach her, you know, good morals, religious beliefs, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
1908, Violet's 21. You know, she's obviously done with school. And she's been working as a little governess at a house with 2 little kids nearby. Violet gets the news that her mom is ill and that a doctor on board ship is advising her that she needs to quit her post. Like, she can't do this kind of work anymore and she needs to go to bed rest.
Yeah.
And so Violet gives up being a caretaker for those kids. She gives up the idea of taking exams and finding, like, a real job in the next couple of years. And she decides that she needs to start supporting the family. And she's going to go find work at sea like her mom did.
Not a bad idea.
And then So she gets an initial interview with the Royal Mail, and that seems to go over really well. But then the guy that's interviewing her, like, literally starts criticizing her for being too young. She's too pretty. And he's not being an asshole. He's just seriously worried about, like, her getting, like, what happens aboard, you know, a ship on the ocean to young women surrounded by nothing but men. He said typically the women that the company would hire were, like, officers' widows. So older women who had no other option.
Yeah.
But she really promised him, like, she needed this badly. And she was like, I promise I won't be salacious. I won't, you know, get anybody's, like, attention. I promise.
I just
like,
came out of convent.
Yeah, so, I'll be good.
Yeah.
So he finally kind of nods off and says, yeah, the first vacancy that comes up, I'll put your name in. And so she's so excited, and she goes home. And together, her and her mother put together this plan to make her less attractive. And they put together what they called her man-frightening wardrobe.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, which is just her putting away her prettiest dresses and getting a bunch of gray and frumpy, like, outfits, which pretty much all seem to be in line with the uniform anyways, that her mom would have really been
well-versed with, because she's been doing it. Yeah.
So basically, like, in these uniforms, they had to pay for all of it. So there's an extra expense on top of that. Like, the shipping lines are not giving you, you know, your 2 or 3 outfits that you need to wear for weeks or months at a time. And to top it off, it's like 13 different pieces. You can't present yourself unless you are 100% like put together. So also with, you know, the mom being sick and being at bed rest and being back permanently, if anybody's wondering, the boys have been pulled back out of the orphanage and everyone is staying with mother again.
That's good.
Yeah. I mean, things are hard, but at least they're all together.
Yeah, it makes it easier because the boys can probably earn some money doing some kind of work, right?
Yeah, I bet. I mean, they're not much younger than Violet is.
You said once a year, and she's, 21 or so now?
Mm-hmm. So Violet actually got her first stewardess position aboard the Royal Mail Line shipper, the Orinoco. That it's like literally a 22-year-old boat. It's about as old as freaking Violet is. And she gets that job in 1908. It's pretty quick. Her uniform, like I said, consisted of 13 specific pieces in order for her to even come on board and do her job. But, like, her duties would consist of caring for the paying traveling class on board the boat, just basically making sure that all of their comforts were looked after. You know, they make up their rooms, they bring them drinks, they're looking after their dietary restrictions, and they're just caring for them when they get really seasick.
Yeah.
And just like a number of other duties.
They're being a steward on a boat.
Yeah, and it's not much different from what it is today. Like, these poor people work so hard when the ship's working. I mean, some of these stewardesses, you know, they're up before you are so that they can have your breakfast ready. And they have to stay up until you decide you're ready to go into bed because they still have to clean up after you so that when you wake up in the morning, everything's beautiful. Like, it's not an easy life, and you don't get a lot of your own space at the end of the day to even go sleep. Life on board ship is not the easiest thing. Then to top it off, you know, you got to get your sea legs under you. You got to get used to seasickness.
Yeah.
And you got to hope that goes away. One of the things that Violet goes through, because, like, all these lines that she's on right now, they're all actually going back to South America and, like, the Caribbean. It's a very simple trip that's not as dangerous as, say, what the Titanic was taking on.
And it's going to more warmer climates and everything.
Still, I mean, she had to face some problems. So for a while, she had this really infected thumb. Mm-hmm. And then the same time she had the really infected thumb, she experienced her first really severe tropical storm while being on board. And this storm was so bad that she remembered the entire crew, including the doctor, getting seasick. Like, everybody was fucking laid out from this one.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And this was one of those storms that she remembers being like, that's when the first time fear goes into your heart, you know, because everybody on board a ship, no matter what they say, you can't help but have a fear of it sinking.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But being really superstitious or being really stubborn, as she was, like, you just don't think about it.
Yeah.
It's just, we don't think about it, it won't happen. Luckily for her, once the storm ends and everybody's getting better, the doctor spends a lot more time on her and her thumb, but it's so swollen, she swears it's like the size of a German sausage. She's getting it lanced, And by the third time she gets it lanced and she's heading back to her room, one of the people stop her in the saloon, like one of her passengers, and they're like, "Oh dear, did you just get your thumb lanced again? Can you go get me a drink? It's just so hot in here." Like,
some people are great human beings.
Yeah, some people know how to treat the serving class so well. So, yeah, I mean, she did have some, like, tough times on board, but, you know, she did exactly what she said. She didn't bring a lot of unwanted attention to herself. She wasn't a flirt. She wasn't messing around on the boats.
Yeah, she came out of a convent. She's going to act like that.
And, you know, she did get to see a lot of beautiful things. She got to see the building of the Panama Canal. She did get to see, like, New York, and she got to travel a couple different times. She even got to go back to Buenos Aires. Unfortunately for her, like she's not always on the same ship. Whenever your trip or whatever's done, you might get shifted over to a new, like, boat, you know, whatever they need a stewardess on. At one point, she ends up working for this new captain who's, like, literally, he's known for his philandering, except for his wife was a shareholder in the company. So the moment he gets on board, he starts flirting with every woman there. Violet knew that he was going to be a womanizer because everyone's going to gossip about it on board.
Yeah, everyone's going to warn.
Yeah, and so when the chocolates and the flowers and the notes start showing up in her cabin, she just ignores it like it didn't happen. And basically, once he realized that, you know, she was just ignoring him, he just decided to make her life hell and criticize everything that she did on her job and just made it harder than it had to be. You know, so she's under that captain. She gets on another boat where he's not at, but she catches malaria.
Oh, yeah, I'll imagine that.
That puts her, like, in a bed for about 4 days, wherein, like, the ship's money keeper tried to sneak in one night and sexually harass her, and the only reason that didn't happen is because the guard, the person on guard duty that night walking around the ship, he noticed, like, her door was open, and he checked in on her, and it scared the guy, and when the guard walked away, this guy slipped out of the room like the perv he was.
Yeah, well...
And then, unfortunately for Violet, she gets on another boat, and she's right back under the known flirtatious captain.
Yeah.
So she gets back on board and she gets herself fired because she won't flirt back with him.
Yeah.
And whatever the captain says goes. So it doesn't matter what your record is. It doesn't matter if you say, I didn't do anything wrong. And in fact, he even signed off on her record book that you have to get signed off when you get off a ship when you're done working. And they'll sign off how your work was. And he said her work was exemplary. Signed it and everything. But still got her fired by saying that she was too flirtatious with all the men on board. And so the Royal Mail Line fired her. She had to get a new job. And she started throwing out, like, employment letters. And she starts lamenting that she even has to, you know, apply to the White Star Line. She doesn't want to.
Yeah.
That's, like, her second, you know, like, second choices.
It's her safety job.
Yeah, which you would think would be, like, really strange. Like, didn't we just get done saying, like, how opulent these things were?
It's the first one. The Olympics are the first ones that are this opulent, though.
Yeah, and she doesn't want to do it because they already have the reputation, whatever you want, we will do.
Yeah.
And guess who is the doer? But money starts getting real tight and things are not going her way. And she has to go through the whole business again of an interview with the White Star Line where she has to promise, like, she's not too young.
Yeah.
You know, please let me work. And she does. She gets hired, which is amazing because she really needs the work. She's had a few ships under her for the White Star Line, but in June 1910, she's given a position on their new ship, the Olympic, the sister ship of the Titanic. The entire crew for the Olympic has been handpicked from all of the other vessels that work the White Star Line. And Violet's very proud to be one of those people that gets chosen for this.
Yeah, it's definitely a good move for her.
I mean, how out of all these hundreds of people, you get chosen.
Yeah.
It's something to be proud of because it shows that your work has stood out.
Yeah, exactly.
So, right now it's supposed to be the grandest ship. It's the first to have proper bathrooms installed for the stewards. The elegant stairway that you see, like, in the Titanic movie by James Cameron, it's got the same one. It's just not as opulent as the Titanic. Here's the thing, like, Violet doesn't even mention this, but guess who's the captain?
Who is the captain?
Captain Dickhead. Captain Smith.
Smith, yeah.
He's in charge of the Olympic. And on the way out, just like Corey was saying, like, literally ran into the Hawk.
Yeah, that war vessel that was out there that's designed to ram into other ships.
And make them sink.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Smith does not have a clean record, and she saw it firsthand because they had to go get that repaired. But, you know, it's still the biggest, the shiniest, the best boat.
Somehow it doesn't surprise me. Maybe it's not Smith that's the problem. Maybe it's Violet's just unlucky and lucky.
So, okay, but it's not long before the crew of the Olympic gets moved from the Olympic over to the brand new ship, the Titanic.
Yeah.
Like, literally the whole crew, which is an amazing idea because they've been working the twin sister ship. They basically know it back and forth, so getting themselves, like, situated on the Titanic shouldn't be a big deal.
Yeah, not at all.
It's fabulous. Violet's surrounded by everyone she's used to working with. On top of that, this is an even bigger crew, so there's more people coming on board that she knows from, like, all the other lines she's run on. And so for Violet, like, the Titanic is something amazing.
Yeah.
She goes out of her way to talk about how the designer specifically asked the stewards how he can make their lives easier. And he listened. You know, he provided them with their own bathrooms, and he set it up in ways that they suggested so that their lives weren't fucking hell. And they loved the designer so much that they invited him down into the steward section so that they could show him how happy they were and thank him personally.
Well, I mean, like we said, they're not giving out to the lowest bidder for the Titanic. They're putting the money and the effort in, and it's obviously seen with the stewards then. It's nice that they brought him down, though.
Yeah, I mean, they legitimately really enjoyed this boat. Violet took whatever spare time she had. She kind of got to go around and say hello to the people that she knew, kind of got to catch up with a lot of the men that were on the other lines. And, hey, didn't you just get married? Yeah. You know, other people are showing her, like, hey, look how they improved the bar. I can work so much better up here without, like, breaking my back. Everybody's stoked about this. So, according to Violet, when everyone else is boarding, you know, all the scenes where you watch everyone waving and the boat getting to drift out and get pulled, you know, out of the harbor, all the really exciting parts of it, she never gets to see any of that.
Yeah, she's stuck on board.
Yeah, while that's all going on, she and her other stewards and stewardesses, like, they've got to get all of the luggage into the correct rooms. Like, she's in charge of a certain section of first class.
Yeah.
So, it's got to be right. She's in a rush to get her passengers situated. You know, at this time, she doesn't even mention how the Titanic almost ran into the New York on the way out.
She might not even known of that.
She might not have even seen that part. But according to her, first 4 days of the trip go incredibly smoothly. They leave in a spring, so it's nice weather, you know, clear open skies, and everything is just working like clockwork. You know, yeah, she's tired, but it's just grand and it's working, and the only difference that she can note is that it's getting colder. Yeah. Like, every day is getting a bit, like, colder than she expected. And here's the thing. Violet didn't want to work on these lines because these lines took a very dangerous route through the Atlantic. Like,
yeah, we're up in, like, Iceberg Alley, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, these are big ships, and that's really exciting, but it's still a really dangerous route to make. And for someone, it's like, you know, an air hostess that now has to, like, travel back and forth to, I don't know, Tokyo. That's a long flight.
Yeah.
You know, the more flights you take, the more possibility that something will go wrong.
Exactly.
So, it's she's working and everything's great. But on April 14th, Violet's actually finished up her work for the day. She's in her cabin with her roommate. They're both laying down in their bunks, and Violet's reading through some magazines. She even claims that someone gave her, like, a really weird Irish prayer, and so she and her roommate, like, read it over and kind of giggle over it, but then right before she goes to bed, she, like, seriously contemplates it, because this whole trip she hasn't had any time to look at what this thing was that her friend gave her.
Yeah.
And so she's laying there having contemplated this weird Irish prayer, and she's kind of, like, drowsing in and out when all of a sudden there's a crash.
Not what you want.
And she says it's followed by a low, rending, crunching, ripping sound. And then she says the ship just shivers, and then the sound of her engines cease. She could hear all of this from her cabin.
Yeah, that's not what you want to hear.
So, with the engine ceasing, it's dead quiet for a minute. Like, and that's the thing about these big boats, or any big boat. The difference between an engine being on and the engines being off
is huge.
I can't explain. Like, you get so used to it. the hum of a boat working, that it just is like background noise. But the moment it goes quiet, it hits you. It's weird. She's just laying there because it's dead quiet for a minute, and then they can kind of start hearing the doors in the steward's cabins start opening. People are starting to get up because almost everyone just got off duty. Everyone's just laying down into bed. So for everything to start happening, like, everyone's starting to come out of their rooms. And so Violet hasn't even moved. Like, she's just kind of laying there in shock, the way you tell yourself, if I don't move, it's not real.
Yeah.
And her roommate looks over the side and looks down at her and just says, sounds as if something's happened.
Yeah, well, that's the sound of it.
So suddenly the stewards begin returning to their duties, like the same duties that they all just got off of. So Violet kind of realizes, like, I guess I should too.
Yeah.
She gets up with her roommate and they start getting dressed. Violet's very nervous and she's basically lying to herself, and her teeth start chattering, and like all her fingers are thumbs now. It's hard to get clothes on.
Yeah.
And in the doorframe of her bedroom, one of her stewards that help her in her section, his name's Stanley, he comes knocking at their door, and his face is really white, and he says to her, I'm calling all our people, sister. And this is something he used to call her in private, maybe either from her times in the convent, or maybe because she's so young, she's like the little sister on board a boat.
Yeah.
The fact is like, he says this name that he would only call her in private to each other.
Yeah.
And he's just saying it. Like, that's how
it's a pet
off
name.
he is.
It's like a pet name too, I guess.
Yeah, but he said it in front of other people. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking Stanley is already on top of this, and he's already freaking out.
Yeah.
And so he tells her, I'm calling all our people. He tells her, anything you'd like me to do for you on my way? You know the ship is sinking. She's reeling at him. It's the first person to say it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, she still doesn't believe this. And so she follows Stanley up to their section, but the very, like, immobility, the very fact that the ship is not moving at all, it's just, like, really shocking to her. So she just starts working on automatic, and she's, untying and readjusting children's life belts. She's moving through her section trying to wake up her passengers who are all sleepy, get them dressed, get their life belts on, and yet at the same time, like, reassure them that everything's fine.
That's right. I forget how late the time is, because the iceberg was hit, like I think after 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah. So for the most part, people have had that. Remember, 11-course meal. My ass would be bed by 9. There are some people who are up, who were in like the smoking lounge. People are still kind of dressed up, but they're quietly like talking, smoking in the gangways.
Yeah.
They don't need to be ushered out of bed and set up and all that. Especially like families, they would have been long asleep.
Oh yeah, easily.
But remember this too. These stewards, they don't have walkie-talkies. The officers, how are they? They're only passing messages back and forth.
Yeah.
So right now, Violet and all the other stewards have literally just gotten up and gone back to work because they know something's happened. But even they don't know what's going on. They just know that their job is to keep everybody calm and just ready for whatever's going to happen. She finally gets the order that comes down. It's everybody needs to get to the boats.
Yeah.
But just as a precautionary measure. Like, they are told this. So, of course, Violet is continuing to help put on these life belts, and she's reminding people that they need to take warm clothes, that grab a blanket, maybe grab some of your valuables while you're heading up. But no, of course, this is a precautionary measure.
Yeah.
They're in no rush, but hey, like, it's kind of chilly up there. Basically, people are hearing that this is a precautionary measure, and we're talking about midnight. People don't actually want to come up because they don't really know what's going on. So they're very reluctant, and they're not moving very quickly.
Yeah, and they're tired and...
Yeah, so, like, people are just kind of moving, and this is the first class. Remember, we got to get the first class situated before any other classes can get done. So you've got all these really wealthy people who don't really know what's happening, waking up, getting dressed, coming upstairs, taking their damn time, to the point where, like, officers are anxiously peering, like, over the side so that they can see, are they coming up? Are they getting up here?
Yeah.
Because they know exactly what's happened.
They just don't want to have a panic going through the ship.
Well, maybe they should have done so, because...
maybe, but, if you do that, then you're going to have... You've seen how Black Friday works. You're going to have that on a ship in the middle of the ocean that's sinking.
Yeah, you don't want the rush. So, she gets all her first-class passengers upstairs, and that's around the time that she realizes that there's no sound. Like, the Titanic is just, like, steady as a stone. So there's another point. We're trying to tell you that there's no real emergency, and the boat's just not moving.
But it's not moving at all. Like, the engine's off. That's
Yeah, but you're steady.
Wrong.
How can you convince people that you're freaking sinking when they're standing there and it's like, okay, we just stopped. What's your problem?
Yeah, that is an issue.
So Violet actually returns to her room. Like, now that she gets everybody situated from her first class, she really doesn't know what to do with herself. So she returns back to her cabin where her roommate Anne already is, and they both basically just start unconsciously tidying up their cabin because they don't know what to do with themselves. And thank God again for Stanley, because he appears back in the door, and I think they must have scared the shit out of him because he goes, "My God, don't you realize that this ship will sink? She has struck an iceberg that you have to follow the rest upstairs as quickly as possible." Like, he's just flabbergasted that these two women have even just gone back downstairs. And so, like, he comes into their room and Violet starts to kind of fumble, like, looking for a coat, but then she remembers, like, it's spring and she didn't plan for this. She didn't plan for it to get so cold, so she only brought, like, a spring attire and her uniform.
Yeah.
So Stanley just, like, reaches into her closet and just grabs, like, the first outfit he sees, which is, like, her prized, like, spring outfits covered in frills and flowers. And
yeah,
this is how much she's just not getting it. She's just, her brain is in shock and she's not letting herself accept it. And they literally get into, like, a little spat over it, and she's like, "No, Stan, that won't do." You know, she's trying to crack a joke. She's like, "That's not a rig for a shipwreck, all fussed up and gay." Like, it's a bad joke, but it's the best she's got.
Yeah.
And then he tries to, like, you know, "What about a hat?" "Oh, Stan, I can't wear a hat covered in sweet peas. You know, no one's gonna wish to see me up there for precautionary measures dressed up like that." Poor Stan. Poor Stan probably wanted to shake her like a baby.
He's just trying to get her off the ship at that point.
Poor Stan. I feel so bad for him. So they get over arguing over clothes and hats, and she just borrows a scarf and ties it around her neck, and she like closes the door, and she tells Stanley, "So long, Stan. Come up soon yourself, won't you?" And halfway up the stairs, Violet looked back to Stan so she could wave at him. And he was just standing, like, with his arms clasped behind him in the corner where he usually kept watch. Let's face facts. Violet's not accepting this, and Stan already knows he's dead. So she gets up on deck, and she found officers busy trying to get lifeboats ready to lower in order to get people on them, but everyone else is just, like, curiously wandering up and down the deck. Like, they've got nothing to do, they don't really know what's happening, and no one's taking this seriously. Violet starts feeling really cold, so she actually slips back downstairs into the first open cabin that she can find, and she grabs herself a silk eiderdown, which is just like a
duvet, isn't it?
Yeah, a silk duvet that goes on a bed. Which blows my mind, because she goes downstairs into the first class cabins, and she's literally seeing them in a way she's never seen before. I mean, there's clothes, like, strewn everywhere. Like, everything's in disarray. There's literal jewels, like, laying on dressing tables.
Yeah.
She could have walked in, picked up any jewelry she wanted to. She could have grabbed any rich woman's, like,
warm jacket.
You know, everyone's wearing fur. She makes the decision to walk in and grab one of the ship's items in order probably just not to get in trouble.
Yeah, probably.
As she's putting it around her shoulders and going back upstairs, she passes a group of officers chatting in the companion square. She says they smiled and waved, and she waved back at them. It took years for her to tell anyone that this was Captain Smith, Bruce Ismay, the owner of the line, the purser McElroy, and the Dr. O'Laughlin. So, like, four of the top guys up there talking about what the fuck is happening, and she's just, like, waving. So she returns to the deck, and she runs straight into the band and the band leader and their group going on to play their instruments. And she's remembering thinking, like, that's really odd for them to be up, like, playing music. And of course the band leader is just like, "Oh, just going to give them a tune to cheer things up a bit."
Yeah.
Again, everybody, it's like nobody's admitting what's happening but Stan.
Yeah, he's the only one so far that has been.
Yeah. Well, Violet, she gets back on deck and she's standing there and she could hear them playing. She's watching everybody on board just dicking around. And so she was watching, like, a female yelling about how she's not going to get on this boat. She's telling this officer off because she refuses to go without her father. You know, and this is just what the officers are having to deal with. Like, they're trying to hurry first class people onto boats where you were not supposed to tell the first class how to do anything.
Yeah.
You know?
It's first class, and you don't tell me what to do. I pay your salary.
Yeah, there's more arguments going on about who and who would not go into the boats, which appeared to be suspended miles above, like, all this black darkness below.
They
You
just
got two
push
men
it.
on either side pushing it and then trying to get it down. So what these people are seeing is a really dark night. Their ship's not moving at all, but it doesn't feel like anything's happened to it. It's just not moving. To top it off, all they've ever heard is this is the unsinkable Titanic. Why are we suddenly out by the boats for these precautionary measures?
Yeah.
And then, to make things even worse, you can look out on the horizon and see some lights. So they know that there's a boat out there. So it's even scarier for some people at the idea that, what if I get in this little lifeboat and you put me down there and we drift off and I die?
Yeah.
Because your stupid boat wasn't sinking and you made me go get into the inky darkness. These are all the thoughts these people are probably having. Like, they're finding every reason why they don't need to get on these lifeboats.
Yeah.
So as the lifeboats begin to lower, some are barely even getting filled, and some are almost too full. So we're starting to get to the point, it's always women and children.
Yep.
You're not seeing men getting on these things. So, of course, like, since Violet's just a steward, just because she's a woman doesn't mean she's getting on the first class lifeboats.
Yeah.
She's just standing there waiting. Like, nobody's telling her what to do. So as she's watching, like, everyone fill into these lifeboats, she turns around, she sees another steward, and he's just standing with his back, like, he's leaning against the bulkhead. He's got his hands in his pocket, and he's smoking a cigarette. And it's literally like someone slapped Violet in the face. This is what it took for her to realize something is just, like, this is so wrong. Because she's never, in all her time working for these ships, ever seen someone in the steward line acting that way up on deck around passengers. Yeah. So she actually got to watch JJ Astor hand his wife into a boat. He waved at his wife encouragingly as he stepped back into the crowd of men. And then Violet and Anne stayed together, and they just kind of stood and watched as there was nothing that they could really do. And then they heard a shot, and then they watched a white rocket shoot up into the air, and then another. And these are like warning shots. These are SOS, like rockets. Flares. Violet is still on deck when those two go up.
Yeah.
Things are happening fast now. So her group slowly starts to fill into the boat, and then a young officer that knows her is urging them to, like, hurry, and then another rocket goes up into the night, and then around her, a few of the women start to cry loudly because they are leaving their husbands. Their husbands are having to stand there and, like, leave their wives as they go onto these boats and just look at them. And she says the boats were being lowered more rapidly. And then this is when a crowd of foreigners was brought up from the third class, and they all dashed towards one of the boats, and it was almost more than the officer could control. Because imagine, we've spent all this time dicking around for the first class, who did not want to board, and we can't just let the third class all the way up there. So I can only imagine, like, what they were doing, trying to, like, time out how we get everyone on the boats. And by the time the third class came up, these are people, most of them immigrants, who have everything that they own with them to go to America. That was their whole plan. And they've known for a while. I'm sure they heard the shudder worse than...
Well, and the third class, like, rooms are going to be lower in the deck, and that's where the water is coming in from, right around the water line.
They knew exactly how bad things were, and they wanted to come up badly. So they all go flying at the boat, and they're almost more than the officer can handle at that time. She says the boat descended slowly, but the falls that they're pulling on either side are so new and difficult to handle. So at times, like, one end of the lifeboat's, like, really high, and then it's, like, even, and then the other side's really high.
It's not weathered at all.
This is fucking terrifying to think that you're being lowered in this fucking thing into the dark. And then she says men are nearby her, and they start throwing things from the deck into the water. Like anything of material, deck chairs, rafts, any wooden item lying nearby, because the men are now realizing, women and children first, men are not getting on these boats. They're gonna die.
Yeah.
They're starting to realize if this boat goes down, they need things to hold on to. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly, the crowd of people besides Violet parts. She turns to look, and a man goes dashing past her and hurls himself into the lifeboat that's descending below. And Violet turns to comment on this to Anne, but as she does, like, as she turns to tell Anne, like, did you just see that? She's looking down the length of the ship, and she's noticing that the forward part of her is lower now. And then one of the mailmen of the crew comes up, joins next to her, and he kind of leans into her and he goes, well, my job's done. The mail is floating up to the F deck. Jack with the water, which she like literally just ignores him because she did not want to hear that.
Yeah, no, that's not anything you'd want to hear.
She feels her arm get jerked, and she turns to see another crew member, and when their eyes met, like he's absolutely exhausted from this evening already, but when his eyes meet hers, like he smiles just for her, and he orders her into the lifeboat, and he calls out good luck. And as she like gets in, she kind of turns around, she's trying to help Anne in because Anne's getting her feet all caught up in the oars, and the crewman calls out to her, and he's holding something up, and he goes, look after this, will you? And she reaches out, naturally, and she gets a baby placed in her arms. This is the thing that breaks my heart. Every single man working on that deck, every man lowering a boat, every man trying to get these people to safety knows that their lives are nothing. They've known for 2 hours that they're dead men. She's lucky enough to actually get on one of the very last lifeboats, and she's got the baby in her arms, and she remembers that the lifeboat groaned as it's descending to the waters below. It's completely like inky black, except for as they go down past certain decks, certain lights just kind of like light up the boat. It's terrifying. As they touch the water, they do it with like a terrific thud. Like they hit hard and they're not expecting it. So
I feel like it's kind of like at that point it's kind of hard to see how far. It's hard to gauge the distance.
Yeah, so like it's coming, but she didn't know how fast. And so they hit it with a thud, and the baby begins to cry. She hears someone orders the oars out, and they slowly pull away from the side of the ship. And then one of the men rowing the boat, she realizes he's one of the firemen from down below, one of the coal shovers. So they got those guys up here because they're the only ones. You got a boat full of women and children. The only ones capable of rowing these things are 4 men that they put in these boats to man the oars. And so they pull away from the boat. Violet just can't take her eyes off the Titanic, and I can't blame her. And she says she just starts to unconsciously count the decks by the rows of lights that she can see. So at first, she's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait, no, that must be wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
She's watching as the boat is slowly lowering into the water, and she's able to count them off by the lights that she can see. By the time it gets down to 4, she can't deny to herself anymore that this is sinking, which you think a while ago she would have figured this shit out.
Yeah, she's still in shock though. I mean, you don't expect it.
The women around her began to cry. She tried to speak to them, but almost all of them are Polish. They don't speak English, so that's terrifying. You just left your only breadwinner. You just left your husband.
Yeah.
And you're sitting on a boat, unable to understand anything anybody's telling you. Violet began to pray, just basically for everyone on board, but she can't even think of like people in particular because she's now realizing Stan, the other guys, the band leaders, all these people who are people to her, flesh and real and warm, just like she is, people she just spoke to. She knows exactly what's about to happen, and she can't handle it. 3 decks were only visible at this point, and she turned to look for the ship lights that she had seen on the horizon earlier, but now they look even further away, which of course now she's gauging a distance differently because she's lower on the water.
Yeah.
But the fact is you and I both know ain't nobody coming.
Yeah, I mean, they've sent out warnings, but the nearest ship had her radio operator asleep.
Yeah, he had turned off his radio. So she's sitting paralyzed in this lifeboat, and she watches as the Titanic lurches forward, and then one of the huge funnels toppled off like a cardboard model falling into the sea with a roar. She hears cries come across the water, and then she hears silence. And then as the ship seemed to right itself, she's commenting that it looks like a hurt animal with a broken back. It settles for a few minutes, but then one more deck of lights disappears, so we're down to 2. And then she went down by the head with a thundering roar of underwater explosions. And for one awful moment of empty, misty blackness, and then she heard an unforgettable, agonizing cry come up from the water. Just a long wail of hundreds of people, and then silence as their little boat just kind of drifted and tossed on the water. Basically, my understanding is, like, as much as they might have been trying to follow the path to the lights of the boat that they'd seen, even though the water is not that bad, there's very little the oarmen can even do.
Yeah, you're just trying to get, at that point, you have to fight the current, but your first instinct is to get away from the Titanic. Yeah,
they're just getting drifted away from everything and everyone. And so she felt like morning would never come. The baby gave like a weak cry, and she was suddenly like terribly convinced that the baby might die in her arms. And like after the Titanic, like she could not have a baby die in her arms. So she takes the duvet off of her shoulders and she wraps the baby up in that, and it just kind of goes to sleep. And they're just sitting in the dark. The oarmen did try and cheer everyone up, just kind of like by whistling or singing, but that quickly just died out because they literally were just so cold. She remembers the sea became more violent and tossed their overloaded boat a little like helplessly about. She remembers that only 4 of them could row, the 4 men on board, and they were totally unequipped to resist the unrelenting strength of the waves. I imagine whatever's coming off of the Titanic from the explosions and from it getting sucked down below. Displacement. She says that they had no light, no water, and no food. Nothing in that boat to keep body or soul together or help us battle the elements. Quote, my stunned mind seemed to remember that there had always been inspections by qualified officials in Southampton for all such as we now lacked, and I was perplexed. It was not doing justice to the beautiful Titanic to leave her without the barest essentials. So she literally realized once they were on these lifeboats that it was so unfair that this meant, like, she's still calling the Titanic majestic. You know, for her to get on this lifeboat and them to finally realize, like, holy shit, there's no blankets. There's no safety food. There's no water. We could be adrift for days.
Yeah.
You know, this being on the lifeboat was no assurance that you were going to live.
Yeah, it just meant you get off the Titanic.
All right, so when light finally did start showing up on the horizon, they did see a boat, but they realized it had stopped so that the people in their little lifeboat had to actually row the rest of the way to the boat that was going to save them. Their boat, the lifeboat number 16, was the last lifeboat to reach the Carpathia. When they were brought on board, glasses of brandy were poured down their throats to keep them warm.
That's probably smart.
Violet remembers it feeling like molten lava being poured down her throat. Like, this is how cold they were. And she stood on deck, and a woman ran up to her, snatched the baby out of her arms, and then just walked away without a word. And in the confusion of her, like, getting off this boat, and
she didn't know what to say.
Yeah, she didn't do anything. She just kind of stood there like, well, okay. Like, she totally lost whereabouts of where the baby went. She was just concerned with getting thawed out. They pulled into New York, and on the way there, she remembered thinking that people weren't treating... Like, she was worried that people were going to treat her badly because she was a crew member of the Titanic, and some people might look at her like she didn't deserve to be saved.
Right.
When other people could have been on the boat. She recalled nobody was treating her that way. So this is a thought that was running through her own mind, like, I didn't deserve to live. Like, it's survivor's guilt.
Yeah, it is.
And so they pulled into New York, and they found out that no other ship had found any survivors but the Carpathia.
Yeah, because the other 2 showed up, and they were late. 15 minutes, you're going to get hypothermia on those waters.
Yeah, and what sucks is in order to get home, Violet's got to take another ship to get back to England. So she does do that. So that's pretty much Violet Jessop's, like, whole Titanic event. Literally minutes probably away from being just another number on the Titanic that didn't survive.
Yeah.
Violet's luck doesn't just end there, because she continues getting on these boats, and I want to introduce you to her final shipwreck.
Oh, boy.
Because the Titanic's not the only one.
What else did she touch?
So Violet does decide she's got to return back to work on sea really quickly, or she's never going to freaking do it.
Yeah.
But she is smart enough to try and obtain work on a new shipping line that just travels to Australia. So no more traveling icy waters for her. When World War I occurs, because remember, the Titanic sank in 1912, so we've only got a number of years before World War I starts up. During World War I, Violet's still really young, and she becomes a war nurse stationed aboard the Red Cross ship, the Britannic. Sound familiar? So on November 21st, 1916, it seemed that it was like a Sunday, I think. There was a mass, and she attended mass, and then when mass had let out, she turned up to breakfast like many of the other people had after mass would. And she's standing in this room filled with officers, you know, when there's a dull, deafening roar, and then the ship gave a shiver.
She knows what that means.
Yeah, she knows that feeling. But this is totally different. This is a warship. This is something that's totally expected to be possible to happen. Except for this is also, like, supposed to be against war law. Like, you're not supposed to attack medical anything. But it doesn't stop anyone from ever doing that, it seems. And unlike the Titanic, everyone on board knew that they had been struck. And within minutes, she says the saloon was completely empty. And everyone was in action except for her, because she's just standing there. And it was such a contrast to the unhurried mess that was the Titanic. It kind of blew her away.
I can imagine.
Violet helped her charge, because she was in charge of a sick woman on board, but they didn't actually have a lot of, like, patience. The sick woman had just been another crew member who was ill.
Yeah.
So she goes to her charge, and she helps her get dressed and go up on deck before she goes back to her room to get her items, and then follows suit going back up on deck. So she puts her coat on and then her life jacket, which she usually would fuss at a passenger for doing, because if you have a coat on and then your life jacket, you can't remove
the coat to float better.
The coat to float better if you start taking on too much water and it gets too heavy. She's not really thinking, and she just goes through this because she had no expectation to actually have to get in the water.
Yeah.
So when she arrives back up on deck and she found that all the other women, like her charge, they had already been lowered into 2 lifeboats, and those first 2 boats had already taken off. And so, even unlike the Titanic, who completely stopped after they hit the iceberg, the Britannic is still going full steam ahead. Like, it's been struck, and they're still going, like, quickly. And it made lowering the lifeboats a lot more difficult.
Oh, I can imagine.
An officer tells her, like, she has to take her place in the boat that she's been assigned to by her official boat muster list. And hers was number 4. So number 4 was nicely positioned on the forward end, away from the back end of the boat where the propellers were still going.
Yeah.
Violet watched as another lifeboat had been lowered into the water, but then it drifted suddenly, and resisting the efforts of all the oarsmen, it went right into the swirling blades of the propellers.
Yeah.
So now, number 4 boat is filled with people, like, and it's getting filled rapidly, but everyone is literally watching as another massacre is, like, happening right next to them. Like, the whole water is now just filled with debris and red streaks from this boat that just hit the propellers. And she can now see a bunch of people who jumped off that boat, and they're just holding on to the ropes of, like, earlier released boats. Like, there's numbers of men just holding on to these things for their life.
Yeah.
To make things better, the ship is now starting to list starboard. So as it's listing and they're going down, number 4 lifeboat hooks itself up on an open porthole. It gets tilted, like, hard. And then it starts righting itself, and then it just starts sliding down the side of the fucking tilting boat, scraping and, like, just making this awful sound, and then it just crashes hard into the water. But they didn't make much success at getting the boat free from the ship once it hit the water. All right, so the Britannic is still moving under its own steam. And a few minutes after her boat hits the water, every man in the group of surrounding boats around her takes a flying leap into the ocean. They came thudding down from behind and all around her, like everybody. There's no word, there's no shouts, there's just hundreds of men jumping into the ocean. And she's just fucking shocked. She's just standing on the boat, shocked, basically by herself, except for there's one other guy on her boat. It's one of the doctors. She turns and she sees the Britannic's huge propellers churning, and they're mincing up everything near them. Men, boats, debris, anything that comes up to these propellers, it's eating it. And she turns to see the doctor's already gone, because she's, like, turning to go talk to him, and he's gone. And her boat is going to be under the propellers in, like, a minute. So she jumps overboard. And she felt like she's going to go, like, she jumps overboard, but she can't swim. She spent most of her childhood in bed. Nobody taught her how to swim. And she's realized that she's never been fully underwater before. This is fucking terrifying.
That's the first time for everything.
So when she jumps into the water, all she feels like is that she's going deeper and deeper into the water as the life belt that she's wearing is coming up, and it kind of hits her in the chin. Yeah. So her one thought was, why had she put on her coat and then her jacket? Like, literally, that's, when you're in a really bad situation, your brain thinks of the weirdest things.
It does. It
really
does.
And thank God she's probably not thinking about those propellers. She's like, why did I put my coat on this way? So she's holding her breath, and she's trying to get up to reach air. And she ends up hitting her head on something hard as she comes back up. And it's something that's preventing her from coming up completely. And after she gets hit hard like that, another large explosion happens. Another large explosion occurs, and she's struck in the back of her head. And like a panic seizes her. She takes in a breath, so she swallows a lot of water, and she makes a frantic effort to start to reach out for anything, to catch onto something.
Yeah.
And she ends up grabbing another arm. She could feel somebody who's alive. But in her mind, even at this time, she recalls that if someone drowns, that they can hold on to you and drag you down.
Yeah.
So for this split moment, she has a warm hand in her hand, and then she has to let it go because she's too afraid that they'll drag her down. So she lets go of the hand. To quote, Jess's life seemed nothing but a whirling, choking ache. I rose to the light of day, my nose barely above the lapping waves. I opened my eyes on an indescribable scene of slaughter, which made me shut them again to keep it out. In that moment, I felt I was sinking. My life jacket was loose and not sufficient to support me. Just then another went floating by, so I grabbed at it and I felt a little more confident. At last, I had something to hold on to. So like another life jacket floats by her and she grabs onto it. But it doesn't end there, so she opens her eyes again, and the first things that her eyes see is a split open head of a guy.
Yeah.
And the only way she can like describe it is like a sheep's head served at the butcher, where the poor brains are just like trickling out onto like a khaki shoulder. I mean, everything around her is just a scene of, she calls it heartbreaking. She says it's a scene of agony. There's limbs everywhere, as if some giant had just grabbed people by the arms and ripped them out and just tossed them.
That's not
You know, the dead are floating by so peacefully now. And so Violet saw as the Britannic moved ahead, and then the Britannic dipped her head a little bit lower and then lower until all the deck machinery fell into the sea like little children's toys. And then the boat plunged, sending her stern, which is the back part with the propellers, rearing hundreds of feet up into the air. And then with a final roar, she like drips down into the depths. So it's just horrific.
Yeah, it's not anything I'd want to be saying.
And that was her final. I would say that would be her final ship sinking, but it wasn't her last ship.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm shocked. Violet...
I would not be going... I love being on the water. I still want to go
No, that would definitely have me completely done with all of that. So Violet, you know, she returns to the White Star Line in 1920 after the war and everything. She retired in 1950, and she actually died in 1971 from congestive heart failure at the age of 83.
See, she didn't have the easiest start, but she seemed to finish strong after she stopped sinking ships.
Like I said, she's the unluckiest little girl in the world.
Yeah.
But I thought it would be a good story to tell, to get someone's, you know, personal view of a person who would love this ship, and still clearly, like, it impressed her so much she loved it, but to see how she saw it going down, and to give us a little bit more of a clear understanding of, like, well, why did it happen like this? Were people just stupid?
Yeah.
No.
Because if you look at all the reports that we see, you know, I'm pulling data from a number of websites or documentaries. It's not that first-hand account that you got out of your book.
Yeah. No. I mean, hearing the first-hand stories are just completely different. And let's face facts. All the stories that we could have heard, 1,500 of them perished in those waters that day.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's completely sad. And I think the funny thing is for Violet, like, the Titanic's not even the worst sinking.
Yeah.
For her, it's the Britannic.
Oh, easily.
Because, you know, Titanic was at night. She only got to hear the things that were happening. She saw things via, like, lights disappearing.
Yeah.
When the Britannic sank, that was full-on daylight, and she got to see some of the most horrific things that metal and machinery does to a human body.
Yeah, that's true.
So, yeah. Is it fate, you think, that the Titanic sank? Or is it just enough stupidity gathered into one big ball of time?
I feel like there's just a lot of specific circumstances that hit, and it just boiled all over it.
I don't know. You guys send us a letter and tell us what you think. Am I right, or is it Corey right? I think it's fate. I think all these things had to happen for the Titanic to have sunk like that. And as far as the Britannic goes, no, that's not fate. That's called being at war.
Yeah, that's a little bit different. So again, everybody, thank you for listening. You can find us on social media at Snafood with the D Podcasts on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Also, we're going to be posting any imagery that we find onto our Libsyn.
Oh, you best believe I got a lot of good images.
That'll be all linked into all of our social media as well. So you can, follow up with our stories, and we'll probably even be sneaking in some smaller, short little tales that we might not broadcast onto these, just to keep everyone interested.
Please drop us a line, drop us a message. We'd love to put you on air, and we want to thank the people who are already listening. It's very gratifying, and we're very honored. So thank you guys already.
Have a good one, everybody.
Bye.